Finally, it is my great pleasure to introduce a gentleman that really needs no introduction, but I'm going to take my point of privilege in introducing my fellow vecino from Conejos County, from Los Rincones. He started his public service, and I'm not meaning that lightly. I knew Secretary Salazar's parents, and so they were big believers on helping others and helping the community. And so starting there and then going on to work for the state of Colorado as chief counsel for Governor Romer, and then as director of natural resources, and then serving as attorney general for Colorado, and then going up on a national level and representing Colorado as a US senator, and then finally making a difference and an impact as Secretary of Interior. Ken, my good friend, it's good to see you. Welcome, bienvenidos. We're very, very, very thankful that you can continue to support our valley. And a lot of this started in a place of Los Rincones, where many people in the valley, much less the whole state of Colorado, much less the United States, could probably find in a map, but a very, very important place in Conejos County. So thank you for being here, and thank you for supporting and initiating this type of education here at Out-of-State University, at Colorado State University, other places of higher education around our state. Essential. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Armando. It is an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon. And my formal job here is to introduce Dan Gibbs, but as usual, I have a few comments before I do that. And so first, I want to just make some acknowledgements on behalf of the children and grandchildren of Henry and Emma Salazar in Los Rincones. I just want to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to Adams State for being involved, and for all the help on the center and all the improvements that you see going on down on the Rio Grande, all the way from the headwaters all the way to the New Mexico line. Major things happening there, and we look forward to having a significant event on a ribbon cutting on May the 15th out on the bridge at Highway 142. I want to say a special thank you to President Cheryl Lovell. She's been with us most of the morning. She may join us for a few comments here in a few before we adjourn. And I want to say we couldn't do this without Adams State. And the leader in all of this really has been Rio and Leroy and Cleve Simpson, Armando, and so many other people who have been involved in this. So we want to just say thank you to everybody, to our state officials, to Representative Donald Valdez, to our new Senator Cleve Simpson. Thank you for having a voice, giving a voice to rural America and to rural Colorado and to the San Luis Valley. I want to thank Craig Cotton for his tremendous presentation this morning. Watch the graphs and know the decline in the aquifers, especially when you think about the challenges in subdistrict number 1. Thank you, Dan Birch and Representative Jenny Arndt, George Whitten, whom I've known for a long time, Jen Henderson, John Shepard, and so many others, to Michael Connor and Angela, who've been a part of this. But I want to underscore a thank you to Armando. Armando Valdez is truly a person who's a salt of the earth, whose family goes back here just like ours for over 150 years. And he has done so much at Adams State, a lot on the Rio Grande Water Conservation District and a whole host of other things, and a true leader at Adams State, the favorite among students in terms of faculty. And this I know about Armando. His future is still a very bright future with many chapters ahead. And what he will do in his chapters in the future will just make sure that the voices of rural Colorado, rural America, the San Luis Valley, where sometimes our voices are not heard because we are far away, far removed from the big cities, far removed from the power centers, that those voices are in fact heard and that our issues are in fact addressed. So I'm going to introduce Dan Gibbs, but I want to say a couple of words. Here, I don't know if Armando can hear you, but anyway, join me in giving him a round of applause. Just join me, because I am applauding on behalf of all of you. So, Armando Valdez, thank you for your leadership. So
thank you. I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you, and thank you for being here. Thank you for Director Gibbs for being here. This is exciting that we could have these conversations. And if we don't start and initiate and demonstrate that leadership in having these conversations, then we get back to those strategies that impact us where we're doing nothing. We need to do something so we can have an influence on the future. So thank you, Ken. Appreciate everything you do.
Thank you, Armando. And I don't know whether it was you or Rio or Mike Connor or somebody put together the wonderful slides, but I've been getting a lot of texts from my family about how beautiful the valley is. And He really
Michael
is.
Carson and Angie O'Connor, I think they were the ones who put it together. I think Angie may have been the one. Angie, I don't know if you're there and you were the one that put the slide together. Are you and Rio?
They are all Rio's photos. All I did was smash them together.
So thank you, Rio. Thank you, Angie, for doing that compilation. It was beautiful. So thank you for recognizing that.
Thank you, Armando. And so Rio and Angie, if you guys can send that around everybody, I think it would be a set of pictures that everybody would very much treasure. So I want to make just a couple of comments on the Rio Grande Basin and sort of what's happened and kind of where we're going as a lead up to introducing Dan Gibbs. I know the basin well. I served as a chairman of the Rio Grande Compact Commission, director of DNR, been involved in a whole host of issues on water on the Rio Grande for now it seems like 30 or 40 years. But it's interesting when one looks back, and Dan, you will already know this, and you will, I'm sure, address this in your presentation, that the issues have not gone away. Same major challenges that we had in the 70s and the 80s continue to loom huge here in the San Luis Valley. And I always looked at the basin as having two threats as a San Luis Valley. One threat to our existence, threats as to whether or not we as a valley would dry up in the same way that major parts of the Arkansas River Valley or places in California have been dried up as water has been moved to places where some say it's a higher use and where they get more money from the water rights. And that certainly can happen here in the San Luis Valley. And so the constant vigilance of everyone is really important. And that's part of the reason for having this kind of symposium, this kind of gathering. And I was impressed with the response to some of the questions earlier on that about 95% of it, of our people who are on this call see this as being a very, very important set of issues, the water issues of the San Luis Valley. Water is in fact the lifeblood of every community, and it certainly is the lifeblood of the San Luis Valley. So what I wanted to say is the threats, as I have seen them in my work in the valley, have been one, the threats from the Front Range. I mean, we now have, in 1990, when we were fighting AWDI, we had like 2.3 million people. Today now in 2020, we're approaching 6 million people. You see the looming and growing Front Range from Colorado Springs all the way to Fort Collins, the huge water shortages that they have in Douglas County and Castle Rock, Colorado Springs, and those communities, Aurora. You're going to continue to have those threats continue. And in fact, the so-called Renewable Water Resources project that is proposed here in the San Luis Valley is an example of what we are seeing today. It's the same thing that was going on in the projects in the 70s and the 90s with AWDI and all the rest of what we have gone through. So these are not new issues. But that's one set of threats. I think the second set of threats is just downstream. There are some legal theorists, some of them who may be even listening at this call, that would say that all you got to do is dry it up with the water in the river, take it south. You don't need to build a pipeline. Now, there's some important constitutional and compact arguments that will prevent that from happening. But that said, one has to exercise constant vigilance. And so, Dan, for you and for Attorney General Phil Weiser, who is a good friend who spent a lot of time here in the Valley, here at this house in Conejones County, we just have to make sure that we exercise constant vigilance on the interstate side, as well as what's going to happen in terms of potential basin transfers out of the valley into the Front Range. So what I wanted to say is, as we look at these issues, it's important for us to remember the great battles. And I could go through each one of them and probably give you an hour presentation on each, but I won't. But I want to say just a few things about AWDI and the fight of the late 80s and 90s. It was a ferocious battle, Dan and Craig, and some of you who are on the webinar will very much remember the ferociousness of the fight. Now, we won that fight against AWDI in large part. Is the audio lost?
I'm still hearing you, Ken. I don't know about others, but I'm still hearing you.
Are we okay, Rio?
Dan, this is Michael Carson, and yeah, I have audio, so you're that may be that one user.
Good. So audio is coming on. Okay, well, thank you so much. So the ferocity of the AWDI battle, the Valley won that battle. We won that battle against some hugely powerful political forces, as well as people who had a lot of money. But the reason we won that battle is because the Valley came together and united as one. The Valley said, no, we're not gonna let that happen to us. And so you know how taxing ourselves can sometimes be a difficult proposition, right? And the Valley yet 90+% tax ourselves to be able to carry on that fight against AWDI. And we were able to win. We were able to win that fight. Now, as hard as it was, as hard as that struggle was, there were some very good things that came out of that battle. In 2000, President Clinton signed the legislation on the Great Sand Dunes National Park. And that's what's created a huge amount of attention in the Valley, its history, its heritage, its protection, its water resources. I don't know if the superintendent of the national parks is on, but you know, presentations that I have been a part of, I know that back when we created the national park, there were 180,000 visitors, and last year we went over 500,000 visitors from into the Great Sand Dunes National Park. So I tell you that story because there were some good things that came out of that crisis. And Dan, in that particular time, I was an attorney general working with Scott McGinnis, representative, and working with the Clinton administration, Democratic administration, Bruce Babbitt, and Senator Ben Nighthorse Campbell. And we pulled together a lot of the efforts at the national level to make that happen and to include protections in the legislation that would make sure that we in the Valley would have additional protections beyond the San Luis Valley Water Protection Act, which had been passed earlier, to try to stop those interbasin transfers from happening. So as director of the Department of Natural Resources, Dan, that's the kind of thing that you are going to be involved in. I want to just put a punctuation on the ferocity of that battle. Some of you will remember it, but it was very, very tough. There was a time when the AWDI proponents and their lawyers ended up tailing me and my family. We had to move out of our house for a time because there was a threat against us. And it was that kind of ferocity. It was also, to me, what ended up creating, in many ways, Dan, the opportunity that you have as Director of the Department of Natural Resources. In 1992, I dismissed the then state engineer and the then director of the Water Conservation Board for a lot of reasons, including what they wanted to do was to sell out the compact rights on the Colorado River. But there was also an element that I don't know that it's public, but it involved the Valley. It was the powers that existed at the time, the state engineer and others, the attorney general, who had made a deal with AWDI to sign off on a decree that would take the first 30,000 acre feet of water from the Valley through a pipeline into the Front Range. In my view, that was inconsistent with the governor's direction and with my direction on what we were trying to do at the time. And it was a very, very difficult and ferocious time. We may now be on the precipice of another one of those great battles. I know renewable water resources is high on the mind of your Grand Water Conservation District and users here in the Valley. Has a nice name, and I know the people who are involved, some of them are even friends of mine, but they are not going to succeed. It should not succeed in that project. I was thinking about it as Craig made his presentation this morning on the decline of the aquifers in sub-district number 1. You start thinking that 40,000 acres have already been dried up in order to try to get the water level in the aquifer to come back into the sustainable category. Well, it's not getting done, so there's going to have to be a lot more done in order to achieve the sustainability goals of integrating the usage of surface water and groundwater. And so if you have a straw that comes into the Valley that takes X 10,000 acre feet of water, what's it going to do to all of those areas? This is going to make it more difficult for us to be able to come back into sustainability of the aquifer. And so the challenges ahead, in my view, are for us to make sure that we're protecting the already very limited supply that we have in this valley, that we address the challenges internally within the San Luis Valley and the integration of the senior surface water rights and the junior rights, which are the wells. And there's going to be some sacrifice that obviously is going to have to be made. People are going through that sacrifice right now, especially with the approval of the 6 plans that Craig approved and the state engineer approved for the replacement plans for the 6 districts. So that's a long and maybe too long a way of just telling you that there are significant challenges ahead, but when the valley comes together, we are able to come out the other side in a very good way. Now, it's my honor to introduce Dan Gibbs. Besides all of my family here, I know tuned in from their houses all around the valley and our love for the Rio Grande. I love Armando Valdez. I too love Dan Gibbs. You know, Dan has been a part of my professional and political life from the time I started. And in Summit County, he, in those days, was probably 23 and 24 years old, and he was helping me put up signs around. In fact, we stored some of our signs at his house. Anyway, he went on to become a senator in the General Assembly and was one of the most effective senators in Colorado. Sat on the Finance Committee. Moved from there. He could have been reelected, probably with no opposition, because he was such a problem solver. But at the time, he said something to the effect, I think I remember the comment, that in Denver and in the state General Assembly, sometimes things were seen as just Republican and Democrat and the constant polarization that takes place. And so he said, I want to get away from here and I want to go solve problems in Summit County as a Summit County Commissioner. And he served in that position over, I think it's almost 10 years, 8 years, something like that. And then he got a call from the governor, Governor Polis, and he asked him if he would become director of the Department of Natural Resources. That was a day I cheered and I clapped and made a few somersaults just because I was so proud of him and the fact that Dan is one of those problem solvers. So I am honored on behalf of the Salazar Center, the Adams State University, and all of us here in the Valley to say thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your comments. Mr. Executive Director, Dan Gibbs.
Great. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me all right? Okay, good. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for that kind introduction. I wish that I could be in the San Luis Valley. I think normally this particular event is at Adams State University, and I wish I could be there with you all. But right now I'm in my office in Denver. I'm normally working out of my office at my home in Summit County, but I'm down in Denver today. And you know, Secretary Salazar, you have done so much, and I really appreciate, you've been such an amazing mentor for me, and I really appreciate all your advice that you've given me. But most of all, I'm really grateful for your friendship throughout the years. And you have done so much, and I just want to highlight one amazing thing that, you know, when you think of a legacy that you've worked on, and now as the DNR director, I get to serve on the GOCO board, which you all know that Ken Salazar was really the founder of GOCO. But since 1992, GOCO has spent $1.3 billion with a B dollars on 5,200 projects in 64 counties, restored 906 miles of trails, restored 1,000 miles of rivers protection, and 9,500 Colorado Youth Corps have been employed so far. So that is just amazing, amazing legacy, Ken, that you have, just GOCO alone. Absolutely amazing. And I love serving on GOCO, and I look forward to having discussions with you on the GOCO Point 2.0 that we can discuss on another date. I also want to recognize and thank another San Luis Valley leader. We have Heather Dutton. She has served on the Water Conservation Board for the Valley. She's been doing such a really great job, I think, for the Valley. Also really appreciate Armando and Rio for helping to organize and facilitate this really important Rio Grande State of the Basin Symposium. And I also want to give a shout out to Craig Cotton. I know he spoke earlier. I know he's such a steady hand and provides great leadership on water administration for the San Luis Valley. So thank you, Craig, for your great leadership as well. So I have some prepared speaking remarks. I want to just cover a lot of kind of what we do at the Department of Natural Resources, tie it into water, some of the bills that we're working on. And then also a little bit later, want to open it up to any discussions, any questions you may have, whether it's on wolf reintroduction or water or forest health issues or wildfires. You know, anything is fair game. So, although the 2020 has presented some very challenging circumstances for the pandemic and economic recession to a historic wildfire and drought season, our mission at the Department of Natural Resources has really stayed the same. So for those that may or may not know, the DNR really has a unique charge to develop, preserve, and enhance Colorado's natural resources for the benefit and enjoyment of people today and tomorrow. As a quick background, the DNR is organized into 6 main divisions with a broad range of responsibilities and oversight of a wide variety of issues and regulations. So we have the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and the Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety. They're charged with regulating oil and gas and mineral development to protect public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We have our Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They manage our now 42 state parks with the addition of Fisher's Peak that just opened up in Trinidad. And also we manage our Colorado's wildlife, more than 350 wildlife areas and a host of recreational programs. We have our Water Conservation Board and our Division of Water Resources. They're responsible for providing planning and policy expertise for Colorado's water future and careful administration of water rights today. We also have our Colorado State Land Board, and they manage state trust assets to provide reasonable and consistent income to support K through 12 education. And actually just last year, the State Land Board brought in $178 million for K through 12 education. That's pretty amazing. In addition, we have our Colorado Avalanche Information Center that is based within the Executive Director's Office. That's really a special program that provides avalanche forecasting and services and education to provide the best available information for folks that are, whether you're on a snowmobile, you're backcountry skiing, or just the traveling public. We've had a really challenging year on avalanches this year. And then also we have our Division of Forestry, and that's housed within the Department of Natural Resources, but staffed through the Colorado State Forest Service. And we focus on stewardship of our Colorado's diverse forest, and really, and also to benefit for now and also future generations. I want to give you all a snapshot of some of our legislative agenda that we have this year. So as many of you know, the legislative session is really in full swing right now. And we have a very ambitious agenda at the state legislature, which includes our annual water projects bill. This year, CWCB will fund the continuation of satellite monitoring system operations and maintenance, Colorado flood plan, map modernization program, our weather modification permitting program, a technical assistance for federal cost share programs, just to name a few items. We are also working on reimagining and strengthening our Forest Health Advisory Council. So this bill proposes to reestablish the Forest Health Advisory Council within the Department of Natural Resources, Division of Forestry, and change the council's reporting authority to the governor and the General Assembly, and then make recommendations on forest health, wildfire mitigation policy. Right now, it's really an advisory group for the state forester, Mike Lester, but we really want to try to raise the profile of forest health issues in Colorado. We also have our roadside inspection for aquatic nuisance species pilot program. This is a proposal that amends the state legal authority of the State ANS Act to allow authorized agents to perform mandatory wildcraft inspection and decontamination at new WID stations on highways or interstates near state borders, in addition to the current work of WID stations at lakes and reservoirs in Colorado, and run a pilot inspection program during 2 boating seasons of 2021 and 2022. This has continued to be such a major issue for Colorado, where you have a lot of boats that come from out of state, bring in aquatic nuisance species into Colorado. We really want to mitigate that and prevent that from happening. We also have the creation of our Keep Colorado Wild Recreation Pass. This is a proposal that enhances to modernize Colorado Parks and Wildlife funding model by providing a mechanism for all outdoor users to support recreation and wildlife conservation for our state and federal lands. The Keep Colorado Pass is a steeply discounted vehicle display public lands pass that Coloradans can purchase, or they can opt out when they re-register their passenger vehicle. And so we're more or less changing the point of purchase and allowing folks to have a state parks pass when they get their vehicle registered. Also, we have our wildly important goals. These are our performance metrics that we have for the Department of Natural Resources. So Secretary Salazar, I'm not sure if you had these when you were the DNR director, but it's when folks say, hey, what are you working on for the DNR? Well, it's a long list of items, but these are goals that I've worked with the governor on, and they're actually measurable goals that you can look at the governor's dashboard to see how well I'm performing on these goals. So I just want to give you all a snapshot so you all know what the big four performance metrics that we have right now. So WIG, the wildly important goal, or WIG number 1, is to track and prioritize water projects needs. So this is to coordinate Colorado's 8 major basins to create a prioritized statewide database that identifies accurate costs for 160 critical and ready to implement Tier 1 projects by June 30th, 2021. So we are really busy. So in the transportation world, this would be like shovel-ready projects, if you will. So we're really working hard with our basins to identify projects that are ready. Our WIG number 2 is to balance outdoor recreation and conservation. So this is to develop a statewide vision, guidelines, and regional partnerships dedicated to achieving sustainable outdoor recreation and conservation of natural resources and wildlife habitat. We also want to have 3 regional partnerships adopt the vision and guidelines by June 30th, 2021. So this is more or less, trying to almost mirror our basin roundtables, but have it focus on conservation and recreation. So you look around the state of Colorado, sometimes it's just those 2 entities are clashing, to say the least. So we want to work with communities to really look at how we can balance conservation and outdoor recreation needs around Colorado. Our WIG number 3 is to look at sustainable funding for parks and wildlife. This is something that I think also every DNR director, everyone's been talking about for many, many years, but this is to support Parks and Wildlife's work and efforts to develop new sustainable funding sources that allow the division to achieve its 3-part mission to support wildlife, state parks, and outdoor recreation, and to aid land management agencies in Colorado working to achieve these same goals. We want to have identified a game-changing funding strategy, which is actually our Colorado Go Wild Pass, and also raise more money on the private side to really look at how we can look at public-private partnerships, but also generate more income. Our parks have really seen a huge increase, and part of that has been, I'd say, a COVID bump. But if you look at just using March as a bench point for the activities that and numbers we've seen in our state park, last year, if you look March to March, we were a little over 14 million visitors in our state parks. Right now, we're at 19 million visitors. So that's a good problem to have, but we also want to look at ways that we can expand new parks around Colorado and also take care of the parks that we currently have. And then our 4th wildly important goal is our equity, diversity, and inclusion performance metric. So this is to incorporate our EDI, our equity, diversity, and inclusion values as part of the DNR's culture and core business practices. This WIG has 3 focus areas. Number 1, hiring and retention. Number 2, representing Colorado's communities and programs, initiatives, values, and advisory teams. And number 3, advancing equitable community partnerships, principles including building DNR's partnerships in this work. I next want to focus on the drought, last season's fire season, and support for healthy forests. Last year, as you know, we had and actually still currently right now, 100% of our state is in drought. And our 3 largest fires burned some of the most pristine watersheds. And it's more important than ever to talk about the future of water and forest health in our state. I've been a certified wildland firefighter for 14 years now, and feel like it's really, really important. When I get out there in fires and see the impacts, not only during the fire and how it impacts communities, watersheds, wildlife, obviously homes and critical infrastructure, but then to see the after effect too, and really looking at the costs and the challenges of water quality and quantity. And I know the San Luis Valley, you've seen some challenging fire situations. So we really want to amp up how we work on fire and forest health issues in Colorado. So to give you a snapshot of what we saw this past fire season, as you all know, it was definitely unprecedented drought conditions. I would say that was in part, created by climate change. We've seen overdense forests due to a century of fire suppression and inadequate funding of fuels management. We've seen human ignitions caused by more people living and recreating in the wildland urban interface. That's a big issue in Summit County. Even when we have fire bans in place, we still have people making campfires and actually, like, believe it or not, going to a grocery store and going shopping and leaving the campfire burning, which is just unbelievable that anyone would do that. And then climate change definitely creates the wildfire risk too. We've seen Colorado, our 20 largest recorded wildfires occurred over the last 20 years. Colorado's recent average of summer temperatures are even higher than the extreme heat of the 1930s Dust Bowl. Warming has led to peak runoff coming about 1 to 4 weeks earlier, which can lead to further reductions in stream flow and in late summer and fall. So those are some bigger challenges that we're experiencing. So as a result of all these challenges, the governor has recognized this and has really tried to bring more money to the table. So the governor's recent budget takes significant steps to recover from historic wildfire seasons and prepare for the future. DNR is currently working with the legislature on 2 installments of $10 million for 2 grant programs that will help provide immediate support for recovery and restoration projects in response to one of the worst wildfire and drought seasons on record. And number 2, longer term investments for wildfire mitigation, forest and watershed restoration, and large scale stewardship projects. So this includes $6 million in the current fiscal year, which actually expires on January 1st, 2021. And this is $6 million for the forest restoration and wildfire risk mitigation grant program that's administered through the Colorado State Forest Service. And then $4 million for the Colorado Water Conservation Board's watershed restoration program. And really excited to see that. And then moving forward, for the next fiscal year, we have $5 million each for those programs, for both of those moving forward. And we all know, what it costs. I know Dan Dallas is on the phone or in this call too. He's a type 1 or type 2 incident commander, but wildfires can easily cost $1 million a day. But then you look at the after effect of fires, and to give you a snapshot of some of the preliminary numbers that we see for Colorado from last season's fire season. Cameron Peak Fire, that was, the watershed impacts $25 to $50 million. East Troublesome Fire, they're working to try to get a $10 million non-federal funding match right now. Grizzly Creek Fire, that's $1 million too. The Calwood Fire, $5.3 million. And they're still doing analysis on the Pine Gulch Fire in the Mesa County area. So fires aren't cheap. When you fight fires, they're not cheap after either. But I really think this plan gives a good balance of what we need on the front end and on the back end as well. And then next, I want to share water plant updates too. And while, thankfully, I think Craig Cotton earlier maybe gave an overview of how the Rio Grande is actually looking for snowpack, but believe it or not, you are actually leading the state right now. The most recent numbers I have from yesterday have the average snowpack for the Rio Grande at 106%. And comparing that statewide, we're at 92%. The South Platte Basin's at 99%. Colorado River Basin, where I live, is at 90%. So let's things are looking better. Let's really hope that these numbers will continue to improve. But we know that climate change definitely really clearly manifests itself with water. And challenging climate amplifies the uncertainties of the future supplies and makes planning for meeting Colorado's water future needs even more difficult. So as we adapt to a changing climate, we're focused on collaborative and balancing water solutions that involve everyone doing their part, from our agriculture producers to the urbanites, to environmentalists, to recreationalists. We're moving forward on the first update of Colorado's water plan, which is scheduled to be released in 2022. The update will use lessons learned, be more accessible, and evaluate bold new actions that will support Colorado's watershed, cities, and rural communities and farms. I'm also pleased to report that the recently announced the Colorado Recovery Plan. This is the bipartisan stimulus package the governor and Republican and Democrat leaders in the Colorado legislature just committed to just last week, an additional $10 to $20 million for the water plan and $10 to $20 million for watershed restoration. So that's definitely very significant investments, the watershed restoration. So this would be on top of, the $4 million that we have right now, and then the $5 million moving forward. So really glad to see, that moving forward too. And then also we have our anti-speculation work group. I think many of you are familiar with this, and actually one of the previous panelists were just talking about this, but this is very important, of course. So the DNR has implemented, and actually the state legislature created a mechanism that said, okay, the DNR needs to create an anti-speculation law work group. So this is a bipartisan bill that was sponsored last year by Senators Donovan, Coram, and Representative Roberts and Catlin. So the work group is tasked to explore ways to strengthen current anti-speculation law and report to the Water Resources Review Committee by August 15th, 2021 regarding any recommended changes. So it's co-chaired by actually last year's keynote speaker, Kevin Ryan, our state engineer, and also the head of the Division of Water Resources, and also Scott Steinbrecher, who's the Assistant Deputy Attorney General. So in terms of membership, the bill requires members from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, the Division of Water Resources, and Attorney General's Office, and the Judicial Department, but also included an opening to include other stakeholders that would be helpful. So from that, we appointed members of the agriculture community, water users from the East and West Slope, along with outside attorneys with expertise in this body of water law. The group was formed in September of 2020 and has since, we've had 5 meetings, and the most recent meeting actually just occurred just a couple of days ago on March 17th. The group is exploring speculation from a couple different dimensions. So first, the traditional water speculation related to the concepts of beneficial use and existing water law. Some questions here are whether current law is applied consistently, and what barriers or entry to the water court process. And then the second component is exploring more contemporary issues, such as how speculation relates to profit-driven activity. And so those are two key areas that I think are really important. I know that just like many of you, we're really eager to see what the recommendations will look like of this group. They are, as I mentioned, continuing to work, and I don't have what the recommendations will look like quite yet, but really I'm anxiously awaiting what we can do to strengthen our anti-speculation laws in Colorado. We are also working forward too on a water equity task force. And with that, just a week and a half ago, I announced a 20-person water equity task force that's being drafted to set the concepts to be considered by the Department of Natural Resources as part of the Colorado Water Plan update. So we want to look through a lens of EDI as we incorporate and update Colorado's water plan by 2022. So in addition to understanding the EDI challenges of water, the group will be looking at equity regarding idea sharing and communication so that the work of the Water Conservation Board and the roundtables can be more inclusive, welcoming, work on communicating on a range of issues that are aimed towards how we can work along, with all Coloradans to embrace the ideas of the water plan. And I'm really happy to let you all know that representing the Rio Grande Basin, I'm honored that Rio de la Vista, thank you so much for not saying no to me, has agreed to be a representative for this equity task force. We also have from the San Luis Valley, Mike Roque, the executive director of the Community Foundation, San Luis Valley. So thank you to both of them for really stepping up and being a part of that. So the group's work will run in concurrent with drafting of the water plan update and will be concluded in March of 2022 prior to the release of the first draft of the water plan update. And Rio will get you an update on in terms of when that first meeting will be scheduled. Next, I want to share with you some amazing creativity that we've seen in the Rio Grande Basin. So I want to start, wrapping up by highlighting a few projects that demonstrate the proactive, collaborative solutions that the Valley is known for. So first, I want to recognize the Colorado Open Lands, the Esquia initiative project, funded in part through the CWCB water plan grant. So this initiative has been essential and significant effort to preserve working agriculture and unique cultural and conservation heritage of the Esquia communities within the Castillo County. The initiative phase of this initiative has been a tremendous success story, providing resources, and we're really happy to be supportive of that. A next project is the alternative crops, so the crop shifting towards hemp. This is definitely a very promising program in the region for collaborative exploration and using alternative cropping or lower water use crops such as hemp or quinoa to promote groundwater conservation while also sustaining agricultural production. So of course, the most significant barriers in the adoption of lower use crops has been a lack of market opportunities and infrastructure. So to solve that, the recent partnership with Patagonia, the state of Colorado, and the Wright Oaks Farm demonstrate the potential to provide a market for hemp fiber. In addition, Colorado State University and the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition is also mapping alternative crop marketing opportunities that conserve water while meeting local and regional demands for food. These projects represent opportunities to enhance community resilience while helping to restore the aquifer. And finally, I want to acknowledge the Rio Grande groundwater use rules that went into effect 5 days ago. However, sub-districts continue to get creative to meet their annual replacement plan objectives by replacing impacts to surface water rights and achieve groundwater sustainability. I know this has been a very challenging feat, and I want to acknowledge Craig Cotton, who I know has gone above and beyond to help sub-districts as well as owners to get into compliance. We know that he's done really a great job and an example to all of us as we approach water administration and the complicated tasks with compassion, creativity, and a steady hand. Again, the San Luis Valley continues to innovate through the creative use of groundwater easements, which will compensate groundwater users to voluntarily reduce groundwater consumption on a permanent basis with more flexibility than compared to federal land retired programs. And some sub-districts are also assessing the feasibility of utilizing alternative transfer methods, water leasing to replace augmentation needs rather than permanently dry up irrigated farms to do so. So overall, the San Luis Valley, I believe, is very, very strong. The farmers, ranchers, water providers in this area continue to exemplify creativity and resolve to meet our future water challenges. And with that, I just, again, really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today and to speak with you. really look forward to any questions that you all may have, whether it's wolves, water, our parks, whatever it may be. So again, thank you so much for having me, and I really wish that I could be in the St. Louis Valley with you right now, but hopefully soon.
Thank you very much, Dan. And I'm going to ask a first question. Actually, I have two questions, and then I'll turn it over to Armando, and he can close this out and take whatever questions he has. But Dan, you can hear me, right? Go like this. Absolutely good. Awesome. So I have two questions. One is if you can comment within whatever restrictions you have on the state's position on the Renewable Water Resources Project. That's question one. And then question two, there are so many efforts that are going on in the Valley on river restoration and protection of the riparian areas. It all started way back in, I think, 1990 with Nuisance, and people on this call will know his name very well, and Ray Wright and Carlos Shriver, a number of other people, where we started on the restoration of the Rio Grande, and major efforts by Wright and others that have gone on there. And now we're doing some things on the Conejos and on the San Antonio River. So within the buckets of money that you spoke about, CWCB, the projects for this year, all of that, where do you see, give us the biggest opportunities to bring in money into these Valley projects on river restoration? So two questions: renewable water resources and river restoration. And thank you so much for being a part of this today.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, on the Renewable Water Resources Project, right now, the state actually does not have a position on it because we actually haven't seen anything come through our door yet. As you know, the Division of Water Resources, our state engineer's office, would take a very close look, at that. But I'll tell you, myself and the governor feel very strongly in supporting the basin roundtables, and almost from day one, and it may have happened for you too, where someone comes in and they say, "Hey, Dan, I have an idea on a new reservoir," or "I have an idea about this water project or that project. What do you think?" What I've been doing, and I turn it right around on them to say, what does your basin think about it? And I think that's the beauty of the water plan. And when we look at like how projects bubble up and how you get support, I've heard the governor say actually at a Club 20 meeting that he has, big concerns and would be very hesitant to support Trans Mountain diversions without local support. And so for me, it's really important to have a good sense of what the local community thinks of these water projects, moving forward. I definitely know how the San Luis Valley, feels about, about the Renewable Water Resources Project. So I'll just leave it at that. But we officially don't have a position right now, but hearing what locals think of projects is really, really critical. And as you mentioned in your intro about me, I'm a former Summit County Commissioner, and I was elected, 3 terms. And so making sure whether it's water or any land use decisions, having that local buy-in from that local community is really, really important to me. So the next I think question you had on where potential future funding could come from for river restoration projects. And we can work with you in the Valley on getting Water Conservation Board, projects. If there's something that rises to a level that we can explore funding at the state level for, we would definitely be willing to work with the Valley on that. We are also, as some of you may recall, there was the DD funding mechanism on sports betting. So that is now a new mechanism that we have in place for water plan funding. And so that money, we actually haven't seen any of that yet, but we will soon. So that's another dedicated funding source that we frankly just didn't have available. But I want to tell you a big picture for water plan funding moving forward. It's going to be a little rocky, frankly. As you know, Secretary, we have certain divisions that are really dependent on severance tax funds. and severance tax, continues to go up and down. And so it's really challenging to plan for how much money may be available for certain grants when, 1 year we could see, high level, for the state well over, $100 million. And then some years the DNR trickle, is only a couple $1 million. But, we depend not just for Water Conservation Board, but some of our other divisions too on severance tax funds, like funding our OGCC, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So, if there's specific projects, we're definitely willing and able to work with you. I think Becky Mitchell may be on here too, our division director for CWCB, but we are definitely willing to work with Avalia on any projects you have that we should be aware of to help fund.
Thank you, Dan. And Becky is wonderful. So let me have everybody clap for Dan Gibbs and his great presentation, and we'll turn it over to our great leader, Armando Valdez.
Well, thank you, Director Gibbs, for joining us today, and Secretary Salazar for being here. These are important issues, and these are critical issues that we have within our basin and for our entire state. As Director Gibbs talked about, lots of projects that are being put in place and trying to distribute those resources to ensure that we do have some of that viability for the future. We do have that opportunity that some of our panelists talked about earlier, all the way from our existing resources, traditional resources like acequias, efficient systems such as sprinklers and pivot irrigation, municipal use. We've got to find a way for all of our communities to be able to work together, live together, and find ways, again, to push, I think, those strategic alliances that make us all better. So thank you very much for joining us today. Well, as the river levels rise and fall with different things, same thing with our discussions. There's going to be future discussions that we're not even thinking about today that are going to raise some new issues, and there's going to be strategies that we utilize that are going to, take away some of the issues and complexities that we're dealing with right now. But that last discussion with Director Gibbs really focused on another critical resource. We spent a lot of time today talking about water and that resource, but the other one that always is in the back of everything is funding and money. And discussions like this, again, can't happen without that type of funding and those type of financial support. So, as I have over here, the Rio Grande del Norte, Salazar Rio Grande del Norte Center here at Adams State University. Adams State University as a host really brings a high quality level of regional education to support our community. I'd like to thank the center and Rio de la Vista and her staff again. They did an excellent job in preparing today's symposium, and really want to highlight all the program panelists, all the individuals who contributed, everyone that showed up today was able to offer some discussion and questions for the future. Those are going to be future programs in symposiums. Those may spin off other conversations and projects. We talked about John Shepard bringing the Grow Water Smart Institute. Those help to develop some of those positive areas. So we very much thank our sponsors. And one final push, you talked about funding and critical resources. Angie put it out in the chat before, but if you want to contribute directly to the Salazar Rio Grande del Norte Center, there is a donation link there. Please think about contributing so we can continue these water education initiatives in the future. So thank everyone for being here.